fellow who was the window dresser at Hope Renfrew in Calgary, and he was aware of the work I was doing and approached me on the fly and offered me an opportunity to present some work in the window displays. But being a national company, Hope Renfrew, everything has to be passed by the higher-ups in Toronto, and this wasn't, okay. And I took it upon myself to market this event and had posters made and plastered all the holes I could in downtown Calgary. And this guy came upon one of these posters one day and madly phoned me and said, "You got to take that down. We can't advertise this." And I was using the Hope Renfrew font and everything. I never did take them down, and nobody did find out. And interestingly enough, there was a little write-up in the Calgary Herald about these, and so nothing came of it in terms of any repercussions. But I find it quite interesting. The work in this situation takes on a very different meaning. Certainly with this installation shot, it's mocking wealth in a certain sense. These paintings, you have a Victorian well-dressed woman with a band-aid over her nose, and this kind of 18th century man with a lobster hanging off his nose. And I don't think anybody really got that at the time, and I did, and I thought it was pretty interesting. They were going through with this. So, all the while I'm still painting blankets while this is going on. And I tried desperately to get the gallery interested in this kind of thing. They didn't want to take a risk. They wanted money, and I found that very frustrating. So I decided to leave Calgary, and I went back to Toronto with really no plan, no idea of what I was getting myself into, and ended up over 6 years living and working in a 2-room attic apartment. And I must say, I think I have a really good work ethic, and I'm very determined, and I put myself through a lot in Toronto to try and climb this ridiculous ladder of the art world. And I know that now in hindsight, but at the time, I kind of balanced art and life as the same thing, and I think that's problematic to do as well. But having said that, the work changed quite a bit again. Just follow the bouncing ball, because the work's going to keep changing for a while. These are 3 by 4 feet on canvas, heavily impastoed works. They're acrylic using molding paste, so they're kind of mimicking heavily impastoed oil paint, which you can't do. Oil paint is oil paint. But having said that, some of these plants are quite nice, and I got picked up in Toronto by a gallery called the Edward Day Gallery, who's still around. At the time, they also had a space in Kingston, Ontario, where after a while in Toronto, these works ended up. And I should say, a bit about these works. I'm not going to show you entire series as I go through here. There's just examples. These are part of a greater series of about a dozen or more paintings, pretty much based on still life imagery. And, the idea of the still life representing as an idea the company that you keep. And I didn't know it at the time, and again, isolation in the studio became my life. And so beyond plants, there was paintings of irons and coffee makers and dish drying racks full of dishes and vitamin bottles, and underneath the sink, there's always great ideas underneath the sink. Just everyday imagery. I must say, after this body of work, again, you know, ideas with certainly commercial galleries, I was naive, you know, I thought that that was the thing to do and that that would satisfy me in life, but it never did. And, you know, money was becoming short, for sure. So I chose to get a job as a scenic painter in Toronto. And then the work changes again, and I'll talk about this a bit. The job I had as a scenic painter was incredibly influential on the work that came afterwards. I worked about 8 hours Monday to Friday, painting backdrops in a private little company of about eight painters. And the art directors would come to us with styles of painting that would change every project. So you would be asked to do something incredibly graphic one day, the next day it would be very painterly, architecture, you know, everything under the sun, and you had to really think on your feet. And the scale of these things were quite large. They were 15 feet high, 25 feet long, and at the time everything still was, you know, very much about labor. The computer hadn't really latched on to the degree that it has now.
What year was this?
This is 1998, 99, 2000. And I really took to the graphic nature of things. There was a lot of sign painting, which I really fell in love with. Sign painting is very meditative, and you can really just fall into the glory of letter making. And you know, we had to do these giant letters on the floor for anything from Tupperware to Microsoft, and you know, using yourself as a human compass, painting giant circles and letters. It was all really quite phenomenal. So, dealing with that environment on a daily basis really changed my approach to painting and this kind of juxtaposition of seemingly unrelated imagery. You know, there's elements of, I had elements of pictures from Reader's Digest, pots in my house, old buckets, record albums, and you know, there was this series also dealt with numbers, and I spent a lot of time on the street in Toronto just kind of looking and being amazed at the buzz of the place. And we often see, you know, fleets of vehicles, dump trucks, cement trucks with these numbers on their bumpers, and it amazed me, you know, not amazed me, intrigued me in that out of context to the viewer, these numbers really don't mean anything. They only mean something as they relate to the greater fleet of vehicles, sort of cataloging of things. So, you know, perhaps the numbers represent that in the work, a way of just cataloging these things. And I was around 30-ish, I guess, at this time, and I've always been one as an individual and an artist to really concentrate on the passage of time, and I really, you know, take the passage of time to heart, and I really felt the disappearance of my youth. You know, I had a real sense that, okay, things are changing in your life, you're growing up, and things that you once cherished are gone. And so there's a greater sense of whimsy, perhaps nostalgia in the work. And specifically, this painting is called Hand Over Fist, and it's 6 feet square. Each panel was painted separately, and then, you know, there's a lot of collage elements, you know, moving things around, seeing what goes where, and painting upside down, and, you know, really trying to get a handle on the relationship of individual images to a whole. And I was given a Canada Council grant to produce this body of work. After which was completed, again, you know, the Everyday Gallery kind of said, see you later, and I didn't have any venue, and I really wanted to show this work. So I found a kind of space to rent on Dundas West, Toronto, which is at the time, and probably still is, one of the most forgotten parts of Toronto. Great spaces, but you know, nobody really wants to go there. So I got this space, and you know, again, there was a dozen or more paintings, and I really plugged this. You know, I must say that if any of you want to show and you're not getting the opportunities that you want, make your own. Again, I had invitations made up, and I went out and I stood on the corner of Spadina and Bloor Street one day, and I just, you know, was one of those people, here, have a card, and madly, you know, put together press kits for the CBC and for commercial galleries again, and thankfully a gallery picked me up based on that. They were called the Ingram Gallery, and they were on the University in Toronto. And you know, they picked me up based on, again, that previous body of work. And there was a quick turnaround. They offered me a solo show, but they wanted all new work, and which was fine. I've never been one to, you know, have a style, and that's part of the problem I've had, and commercial galleries have had with me, is that, you know, they want somebody that they can depend on. They want somebody that they can say, you know, this is a product. This is what you're going to get, and you can rely on that. And I've never been one of those people to make something the same. I get bored with it. So having said that, you know, this is part of the new series called Full Disclosure that was held in 2003. This painting is called Symphony of the Universe. A little less, well, a lot less dependent on imagery, photographs, and a lot more to do with formalism. And you know, I quite like this painting. This is about 6 feet by 3 feet. And again, two separate canvases playing with one another. And around this time I got a computer. I never had a computer before. I know it's rather late in life, 2003, but all of a sudden there was all this information and imagery, and I was able to go back and look at things that fascinated me as a child. And, you know, Symptom of the Universe comes from a Black Sabbath song, and I was all over YouTube watching Black Sabbath videos, and, you know, I thought that was pretty good. It's a good name. So, and, you know, I must say, you probably realize there's quite an association to pop art with the work that I've done. And I've always liked pop imagery, and I think it's a good way to communicate the time in which we let me go back to that. This body of work, again, they were plugging this work, and they gave me the opportunity to have a piece in the Toronto International Art Fair, and it was great. You know, I must admit it was one of the high points in my career to have a piece out there with, you know, work in this grand auditorium that, you know, you really admire as a painter. But it still kind of let me down. You know, it was just this two-dimensional thing with material on the wall, and it's not going to offer you the answer to life. And, you know, I think that's in part why I paint, is I'm trying to find answers. I'm trying to find answers, kind of grasp that, you know, brass ring as you go by on a horse, and it still keeps me going. So, you know, I got pretty disillusioned with things.